turn on the microphones this time. uh, Thanks for Bill and Ryan for saying hi. Glad you guys were able to get in tonight. So, been working on the grudge car, the White Regal. So, was hoping to be a lot farther along. I'm going to show you some stuff on some wiring. It's not finished. It's not really what I'd want anybody to see at this point, but you know, we're just here to hang out and BS. So, give you guys a sneak preview of that kind of stuff. Just getting stuff done here in the shop, and sorry, running late once again. So I'm still kind of getting things organized here. I wanted to get on time, so yeah, it's getting things organized and getting everything going. So just like there we go. So yeah, so been getting things going along. The Regal was a lot more work than I had originally planned. We did a lot of braid work yesterday. You guys saw all that stuff going on. Last week I showed you about the steel braid and stuff. And so this week was working on wiring and placement of stuff in the car so it all fits and is organized and easy to work on. Makes sense. On a street car, you definitely want things organized so that you can get to it and see what's going on quickly. On a race car, it's even that much more important because usually you're trying to fix things between rounds or between races, and so you don't have a lot of time to mess around. You gotta pretty much have everything accessible and easy to get to, and then you also want it not all spread out so that when you're doing other things to the car, as in this electronics, you don't want the electronics involving where you're where the transmission or nitrous bottles or whatever else you have in the car, intercooler tanks, depending on what kind of power outage the car has. So you want to keep everything organized, tidy, and out of the way as much as possible. So took a little bit of engineering. The car wasn't set up for any of this stuff to go into cars. Sometimes the chassis guys will put brackets and tabs in the car to help organize all that. This chassis guy did make a plate, tabs for one plate to go in. Actually, I shouldn't say that. He had mounts in the trunk for the battery, but with the lithium batteries, we don't run them in the trunk. We usually run them in the passenger area. So that's kind of what I've been working on this week, getting at, and of course, not having all the supplies since I don't wire all the time. Took a little time to get all the connectors and everything I needed, and and then of course you start organizing stuff, and then you come up with a better idea as you're starting to lay it all out. So one of those things with any job, whether it's wiring, plumbing, or anything, you really need to sit down and really make a pretty good diagram of how you want to lay things out. And even with the diagrams, you still run into issues. Something didn't fit with the plumbing, with the dry sump. It was a matter of couldn't get the fittings that I needed. They just didn't make them. So you have to go to plan B or C until you get it all organized and figured out. But we got that all done. That's all wrapped up, and so now we're trying to wrap up this wiring. I was hoping to be done today, but I'm about a day behind. So that's kind of what's been going on. get this one knocked out, and then we got the Smurf coming back. We got to get them engine in that one, so we're ready for the race in 2 weeks. Kind of thrashing last minute, but we'll get her done. And once we get through that race, then I'm gonna take some time and get the engine assembled on the NASCAR. Try to get that thing going. I've been working on Bert's AMC 6-cylinder. The crank wasn't. The machine shop just didn't do what I asked on the crank, so I had to send that out and get it polished to size. And then we ran into an issue with the rings, so now I'm having to send the pistons and rings to Illinois to DSS Racing, and they're going to try to figure out what happened there. The second ring doesn't fit in the ring land, so I don't know if it's a wrong size ring or wrong size ring land. I tried to get the salesman just to verify, but he wants everything sent back, so we paid good money for this stuff, so I'm sending it all back. So hopefully they won't be able to turn that around real quick for us. I need to get that motor done, get that in the car. Bert needs to get his hot rod back together. And then it was kind of good that we snuck this wiring job in on this Regal, because it helped me clear my head a little bit more on the Chevelle, on Dave's Chevelle. So this car only has a few functions in it, so there's not a whole lot of components. And with the Chevelle, there was a lot of components, and you'll see when we start discussing the slideshow I got, the parts aren't made to be compatible with other brand parts. So you got to do some thinking and get it all organized so it makes it easy to do. So in the Regal, we only had an MSD ignition box, a speed wire switch panel, and an AMS 2000 nitrous controller. So we only had and a race pack, so four components, but race pack only connects at the tach and the battery. But you got to get all these things organized so that they all work together and you don't have redundancies in the wiring. I mean, obviously you still have to, you want to keep the wiring as small as possible and as short as possible. When I'm working on race cars, I don't think in pounds, I think in ounces. Where can I cut a couple ounces? Well, you pull a harness from either the MSD unit or the AMS 2000 control unit, and it has a lot of extra wires because it's made to do everything that that company has available to you. But when you end up with 2 or 3 different brands, you end up with a lot of redundancies. So you want to go through and weed out the extra wiring and stuff like that. And so that stuff takes a little bit of time. Mainly it takes organization and planning. So that's what, so doing that on this car got me back in mind straight. Even though I laid out everything on Dave's in the past, I was still having some trouble with how I wanted things to be mounted in the car and stuff like that. That's a whole other thing, is you want everything once it's mounted in the car, you want it organized so it's easy to work on. So you don't want wiring just laying all over the place. I mean, you look underneath a dash of a car, and it's especially the older car, well, especially the 80s and 90s cars, the wiring was a nightmare under the dash, because the manufacturers going from the 50s only put in what they needed for the car, which they didn't have many accessories. Then you get into the 60s, they start getting more like power windows and power door locks and air conditioning and stuff like that. All starts becoming more commonplace. And then you get in the 70s, now they start bringing in control boxes and emission regulations. And in the 80s, then they start getting into all kinds of different stuff like that. And then it just keeps growing. By the late 90s, the wiring was complete chaos in the car. Now, of course, in the 2000s, then they went to modules: body control module, seat control module, HVAC control module. So then you end up, the wiring got small because now you got CAN bus that's communicating between all those components. So it cut out a lot of wiring and a lot of weight in the car, and it made it a lot more tidier underneath the dash and stuff like that. So that's kind of how that was. So when we're doing these hot rods, Dave's Chevelle is a prime example. It's got all the creature comforts of late model cars. We got power windows and locks. We have power window switches on the doors, and then we have a power window switch and door lock switch and exhaust cutout switch mounted on the dash, so that you don't have to reach across the car to open the passenger window. You can just hit the button on the center of the dash. And then stereo with amps and multiple speakers, and the Holley Terminator with trans control, and then the Dakota Digital. Although that is all running off a CAN bus, so that does help things out tremendously. But it's just one of those things. You start getting. You just have to get it. A lot of planning has to go involved in it. Bill says, like his junk. Yeah, we got a lot of stuff going on in Bill's car with the Dominator and sensors everywhere, and he's got 2 sets of gauges in the car because he's got the Holley dash, and he's got all the gauges in the factory cluster and stuff. But Bill is very aware of what I'm talking about, how quickly you get this mass of wiring and stuff under the car. Mike says under the dash harness. Yep, harness nuts now. Yeah. It's crazy what they do. One good thing is, as car manufacturers got smarter, they started making things more modular. So, when Mike and I were working together, we were doing the Comcast bucket trucks. For some reason, Ford does really great with their evaporators. They don't last for crap. But, once you know where all the components are, you can pull that dash out with all the harnesses by unplugging like 4 connectors and 15 screws, and the whole dash comes out, boom, on your lap. It was a real nice job when we were doing those, because it was like a 8-hour job, and I got them down, I think, 2.5 hours I could do them. But that's because that's redundancy. You're doing the same ones over and over and over again. Of course, it'd take us 4 hours to clean all the driver's junk out of the truck. But I digress. So that's what we were working on this week. Like I said, I didn't get as much done as I wanted to, but we'll go ahead and it's almost 1:15, so I guess we can start my little tech session. So let me go ahead and switch screens here. So this is the firewall, passenger firewall in the Regal, and you can see there's the hard to see all the writing, but it's a Braille 16-volt lithium-ion battery. I think it weighs 4 pounds, and it has 1,400 cranking amps. Very, very robust battery. So that's mounted to the firewall. 4 5/16 bolts holding it to the battery. So it's good for NHRA tech. And then the little gray connector here is a 50 amp quick disconnect connector. We use these on all the battery chargers. So the battery charger for the car just plugs right in. There's no alligator clips. You don't have to worry about the alligator clip hitting something else. Somebody hooking up the battery wrong. Getting different people helping out in a mad thrash in the pits and stuff like that. So I always wire them up like that. So and it's got 8 gauge wire on the charging lead, so it should charge fast. And then now that the battery is mounted inside the car, now the lithium batteries do not off gas, so that you don't have to worry about firewalls and all that stuff for gases. But down here we have a 500 amp continuous duty relay or solenoid, and that is what has the battery brake. So anybody that's familiar with racing, there's always has to be a battery switch. Drag racing, it's always on the back of the car. And some of the other sanctioning bodies, road racing and stuff like that, it can be up on the around the windshield area. It has to be clearly marked, but they allow it to be anywhere. But drag racing, it's always on the rear bumper. So that's what this 500 amp continuous duty solenoid does. That is the breakaway from the battery to the car. So we run a Honeywell emergency e-stop button. They're like $100, and I only have to run 20 gauge wire from the e-stop to this unit, and it cuts the power. So in years gone by, we'd have to have the battery in the trunk, 1/0 battery cables going to the back because the distance, and you need the cranking amperage to turn over a big high compression engine. And then you'd have to have this big clunky battery switch back there that all the voltage ran through. And then levers and all this other kind of stuff. Well, now the battery cables are small. This car only has 3 feet of battery cable in the entire car, on the power side and about 5 feet on the ground side. And then it's got 2 20 gauge wires that go back to the e-stop switch. So big weight savings. And of course, we got rid of a 48 pound 16 volt lead acid battery, or AGM, to the ion lithium battery, which, like I said, it weighs I think it weighs 6 pounds. It may even weigh less than that. And then next to that, so this battery at the solenoid, you got this cable here going through the firewall. That's going to the starter. And then this little cable is going to this part. I should have took the cover off. That's a 125 amp bus fuse, and that's what powers up all the components and relays and stuff like that in the car. So that'll keep keeps everything. It's one big fuse for the whole car, and it's all good. We get the ground cable going to chassis ground, and then it's hard to see in this picture, but there's a little looped wire, ground wire, and it's a 4 gauge, and it's going through the firewall also. And that goes to the back of the cylinder heads. So any high horsepower engine, needs a lot of spark energy because it's boosted or turbocharged or anything like that. You always want to have a chassis ground going to the cylinder heads, because the spark plug is looking for the closest path to ground. And you would think, okay, the engine's solid mounted in the car, the heads are solid mounted to the block, but there's a lot of greases, chemicals, ARP, torque lube, all these things in between that can interrupt the spark, interrupt the voltage. So it's not, it will work without it, but it works way better having that. So we loop a wire from both cylinder heads to a main wire going back to the chassis. The chassis is the common ground. The thing about a chromoly or steel, when you look at the tubing and being welded, it's like having a 5-aught battery cable running throughout the entire chassis, as long as you grind the paint off and get the raw steel. But the mass of the steel works very good as a ground. Now, another thing to keep thinking on a regular passenger car, where you have a frame and then body bushings and then a body, or a unibody, or like Camaro Novas, which is part subframe and part unibody, you have to put a lot more grounds in those cars, because now you're relying on sheet metal and spot welds to transfer all that ground amperage. On a race car where it's fully welded, TIG welded, completely different thing. So when you're wiring up your street car, think about that. If you don't have a solid frame going front to back that you can ground to, even if you do that, you still have to run grounds from the frame back to the body, grounds to the engine, because it's rubber mounted or polyurethane mounted or whatever. So you're always going to have all these things you need to kind of think about. What am I grounding to, and is it going to get through everything? Little side note, I used to, when I was doing a lot of work with Excel Mr. Gasket, I had the opportunity to go to the Gator Nationals and to the Southern Nationals in Atlanta, and be the EFI representative at the racetrack. So that way, if somebody came up to the manufacturer's trailer and wanted to talk about fuel injection, the guys that were on the tour, they really didn't know a lot about it. They'd have to look at a catalog and stuff like that. So they would invite the MX to go to these races so that they would have a hands-on guy that could walk their customers through that. So it was a lot of fun, but you do not know how many people would come up and say, "Oh, your Hurst shifter cables are junk," and you're like, "Why would you say that?" "Oh, because it's froze up and the ends came off of it and everything else." And then you'd have to educate the person that they're missing a ground and they were using the shifter cable as a ground. It doesn't work very good as a ground, and it will ruin the cable. So even back then, with that kind of stuff, it got you thinking about stuff like that. So that was always a lot of fun and fun entertainment. Hey, John, glad you got it in. So anyway, so that's the battery mounting on this thing, and then this is the board that mounts in front of it. So you can see up here, there's a hole there, and then one down here in the corner. Those are the Zeus tabs that holds this panel in. Now this is our grid ignition system. So it's got like a 7 style box, and then this grid that is computer controlled, and it has this blue connector connects to the race pack. So the race pack monitors, records all the electronic actions of the grid, which is all your retards and stuff like that. And then this circuit board here is made by Speedwire, and so out of that 125 amp fuse that was on the firewall, we bring a number 6 cable to this stud right here, and then a smaller, like a 10 or 12 to the ground here. And then on this, I think it's a DP25. It's like a computer printer cable type thing. That goes up to the switch panel on the roll cage. So when you flip on switches, it sends low voltage and low amperage down to this potted circuit board, and you've got a fuse and a relay and then an output for every components. 14 components on this one. And it's pretty cool. They give you a little LED right there that shows you that the fuse is good because it's lit up on the down side of the fuse. This side of the fuse is connected to the stud. So on this side, if the fuse blew, this little LED would go out. And then when the circuit is activated and this stud gets power, you got a green LED that lights up there. So you know that, like this one is the ignition. You know the ignition is on because it's got power coming out. So for testing, you wouldn't have to test this box. You could test the component that was connected to. And then that's a starter. It's another ignition accessory, a water pump, fan. This is a dump valve for the transmission. That's a tail light, a headlight, nitrous, purge for the nitrous. This is nitrous enable. Then you got a solenoid another nitrous solenoid trans brake output, and another nitrous solenoid. So now you can maneuver those to whatever you want by using these additional studs up here that you can send a ground signal to one of these, and then that activates that relay, even if you don't use it in your switch panel. So it's pretty cool board. Makes wiring pretty easy, and also makes diagnostics very easy, especially when you're in a hurry. And then of course, what I'm doing, because the battery is behind this panel, I want this panel to be unplugged and removed from the car when you want to get to the battery, instead of having to pull it out and lay it on the floor, and everybody's throwing tools all around, and you got all these power accessories and stuff that could be shorted. So if I go back a picture, you can see there's the connectors that are going to be the outputs and inputs to this circuit board. So that's what will connect to it. And And then there's also, I don't have it done yet, but there's going to be a battery and ground lug here, and that you'd have to undo the battery cable in the ground cable to completely remove it from the car. But other than that, you'd be able to disconnect all these connectors and remove this from the car. Next week I'll have a picture of it where it's all tidied up. I just threw a couple of zip ties on it real quick to take a picture. It's not finished by any means. So when you're laying out a car, whether it be a race car like this, or you're doing your street car or street rod or autocross car or bracket car, you're going to end up with a bunch of different components from different manufacturers. So what you want to do first, let's see, we can go here, and you want to get schematics on what you're working on. So this is the power grid schematic, and they give you the breakdown of all the components that are on the unit. Now, like, they got legacy ignition. We're not going to use that because that's old school stuff, but they give it to you so you could put it to your old car. Stage 5, 4, 3. We're not going to have that many stages of nitrous. So again, those wires can be removed because we don't need it. Points in. We're using crank trigger, so again, that won't be needed. Timeout switch, burnout switch, we're not using them. So all those wires were deleted out of the harness just to make things tidier. So you open up your box and you get your instructions, and like MSD is really nice. They give you this complete wiring breakdown, what pin it goes to, what the color is, and what that circuit does or can be used for. Like your shift light output can handle up to 3 amps continuous ground to a ground switch. So instead of a shift light, because the car is automatically shifted, that will go to our shift solenoid, which only takes 1.5 amps. So that circuit will more than be sufficient to run that without going through a relay. And so those are the little things you just want to verify what you're putting in and stuff like that. So then this is our speed wire. Now their schematic, they break everything down into little quadrants, so I think it makes it a little easier. But here's they show you battery, power wire going to the starter, and then the main fuse and on-off switch, which are on-off switches, that 500 amp solenoid, which I actually put the 500 amp solenoid here because I don't want power going to the starter if the car is killed. But nevertheless, that's how we do it. And 125 amp relay for here. Grounds. See, even they specify grounding to the cylinder head, which goes back to the chassis and the battery. So that's their main wire power. And then they start going into different things of external controls for the relays. How you can switch different relays by different components, normal setups for like nitrous. So they're giving you a lot of information on how you need to wire that control up. So what you got to do is go through the instructions, take notes. I will use this, so let me do that. So like on this one, we're using an accessory for our transmission dump. We're using I forget what this one was for, but there was 3 relays on here that were for something else. We're reusing them for what we need for this project. So we write those notes down, and then we go to the next component. So that next one is the AMS 2000, and here they're showing us a typical nitrous setup, and then in the instructions, there's that's actually the setup that we're going to be using. And then, again, because I got another slide for this, but just again, they show you what needs to be hooked up for their unit. Now you see in this configuration, there's a whole bunch of empty pins that aren't needed for this setup. So obviously, I've removed all those other wires because we don't need them in there. So again, you take your notes and you get all that situated. Go back to my pictures here. All right, so let's go back to. So here's what I didn't do on that sheet, but there I highlighted what I was going to be reusing and stuff like that. So then I started out with that schematic. So now what I did was, you don't have to be a fancy artist or nothing like that. John says, never underestimate the importance of good grounds. You are right. A little side note, not to get too far off topic, but when I had my chassis dyno, I had a customer that did Honda tuning. And I can't tell you how many cars would come in. And if you ever looked at a 80s or 90s Honda, there'd always be like a ground strap from the valve cover to the core support. And there'd be another ground strap from the transmission to the inner fender. And then also the regular battery ground. That was such a prime example of how important grounds were. These kids would work on their car, get them all hopped up, and then they would take them to my customer, Kenny, to have the computer reflashed. So he'd bring it in, we'd put it on the dyno, he'd start doing his tuning stuff, and he would start seeing bad data coming through on his instrumentation for the going. He's communicating directly with the ECU with his laptop. And sure enough, you go back under the hood, and when they put the engine together, they forgot to put the ground onto this valve cover. They didn't do the ground from the inner fender to the transmission. So we take some 10 gauge and make up some grounds, and lo and behold, all the noise in the computer system was fixed, and the car usually picked up. These are like 400 horsepower turbocharged 4-cylinders, and we'd pick up 30, 40 horsepower sometimes just by putting a ground wire on. So yes, never underestimate the importance of grounds. But anyway, so what I did here is I just kind of made little boxes of where components were going to be. We got headlights, fuel pump, the fuel cell is mounted in the front of the car. Here's our starter. This is a bulkhead going through the firewall for the nitrous. So we have a wide open throttle switch, 2 nitrous solenoids for stage 1, another solenoid for stage 2, coil for the ignition. And then, we have our control boxes over here. At that point, I knew I needed 4 relays to activate the nitrous solenoids, which after I read my instructions, I realized I could use this speed wire box to do that. I didn't have to put additional relays in. So that was another good thing. By reading the instructions and really studying them and start jotting down notes, there was 4 solid state relays, which AMS encourages you to use the NOS Holly relays, which are $100 a pop. So that's $400 saved. We didn't need to use, plus components we had to order and stuff like that. So those are the kind of things, when you sit down and you may say, wow, man, I just lost a whole day and I didn't do anything. But you did, because you're getting all this stuff organized and laid out to where it makes sense. Dump valve on the transmission, shifter solenoid to automatically shift the car, and a neutral safety switch, which is on the shifter. So that was my first go around. I knew I needed these components, so let's put these here and then go from there. So then, after making my notes and reading the instructions for the 3rd time, and jotting down the notes and saying, okay, I think I'm going to use this setup here for the nitrous wiring. I'm going to use this setup for this and that. Then I could come up with this more detailed now, because we're only seeing 2 boxes. So we have our MSD grid with the wires that we're going to be using, our speed wire controller, and now with our relays, you can see our relays I've changed the names because now they're things that we're actually going to use. So now I can use that stuff and don't have to worry about it. Oh, the dump was fan. That's what that was. Because you got the water pump. This car uses an ice bucket. It doesn't need there's no cooling fan on it. So I was able to use that fuse. One of these was a nitro solenoid, and I don't remember what the other 2 were, but So what I'll do is I take my label maker, because on the side here they actually have a sticker that shows all the components. So I'll take my label maker and make new labels on the new components. And the other thing with this sheet now is I can put this in the customer's folder that he keeps all of his SFI certifications, and I like to keep all the instructions manuals for all the components, put them all in a folder, and keep that in the trailer. Or if it's a street car, keep it wherever you want to keep important paperwork. My 50 Chevy, I actually had a big Ziploc bag that I stuck in the pouch in the back of the driver's seat. So nobody knew it was even there, but if I ever had a problem, I could pull that out, and all my notes for the wiring were all there. Same goes for this. This tells me, just like an OEM schematic. Now I can go to my schematic and I can see where everything's going. Now here's our AMS wires here. I didn't put the AMS on this sheet because I didn't want to get this sheet too confusing. You get too much on there and it starts getting confusing. So all I did there was put the colors and the circuits that they were going to. Then I'll have another sheet for the AMS going this way, going back to this page. So now with three pieces of paper, all the information's on it. And you don't have to draw it all out like I did. You can just write the colors and where they go to circuits, like we do with the when I started out with Dave's car, I actually made a spreadsheet. So you could do the same thing. You could make a spreadsheet. However you want to do it is good. For the race cars, I do it this way because I may not be there when they're working on the car. So I need to make it understandable so that anybody that's working on the car can go and make some sense of it. That's why I try to color coordinate the color lines on the page, so it kind of makes sense. It's another reason why I usually try to use the same wire throughout a circuit all the way to the end for that reason, so that it makes sense, and you're tracing wires, and on this end of the harness it's red, and on the other end of the harness there's no red wire, now it's yellow. Nobody's going to know that, so you have to make notes and stuff for that. So and even for yourself, if it's your own car, you get the car done, and you thought out your processes thoroughly, and you did a great job, and the car's been running great, but who knows, 5 years later you may have a sensor go bad or a component go bad. Now you have to go back through all that, and if you don't make some kind of notes for yourself in some type of organized fashion, instead of just a bunch of post-it notes with pin 2 was this, and then you look at it 5 years later going, what the hell was pin 2? I don't even know what you're talking about. So, trying to organize the things to where it makes sense, I think it works out great for yourself or for whoever's working on it. Another good thing is if you're building something for a friend, you may not be around. They may take it to a garage, and the garage guy's going to say, well, where's the schematic for the car? And you're going to, the guy can pull out these sheets of paper. This is what I got. And, any C or higher grade garage technician would be able to look at this schematic and understand what's going on. They may not know what the components are, but they can see, what's going on, and they can figure it out between all the owner's manuals of each component and what we've done here. So that's what we've been working on. So again, that's the original sheet that I started with the grid. That was the setup I used for the AMS control unit, and like this unit here, this does data logging. You can put a bunch of sensors to it, drive shaft sensors, so you could use this unit as your data logger and your nitrous controller or boost controller, whatever you want to use it for. But a lot of times you get these cars where you've already got a race pack, and the guy's like, I'd rather have the race pack for data logging because, and it's true, most of your transmission torque converter guys and any race company will know or understand a race pack data log. They may not have ever worked with an AMS 2000. So, it's good to just think about which components you're going to use and stuff like that. And then of course, there's all the same thing that MSD does, NLR does too. They tell you whatever the color is, what the pin location was, what kind of signal it is or reading, and then in this box here they tell you what you can do with it. John says, I walked into a wiring mess. You bought my car, no documentation whatsoever. Yeah, it happens. I've worked on a ton of them over the years myself, and that's why I've learned this mythology. Nobody really taught me it. I just was like, man, I don't want to have to go through this mess when I'm done. Like on my personal car, I just buy the 12 circuit universal fuse kits, wiring kits. They have the wires every 12 inches they got them written what they are and stuff, but they're really not set up for anything particular. So you have to do a lot of legwork yourself to make those work. And then like in Dave's car, he opted to go with the painless. The painless is a lot better because now it also has circuit numbers on it, and there's a manual that goes with it, and the manual already shows, do you have a GM column, a Ford column, a GM ignition switch, a Ford Chrysler ignition switch, and they have all the pinouts to go with all those components. So the painless is a much better setup for the novice guy that is gonna do their first wiring job, because it's broken down very well. They don't always explain the circuitry very good. Even for myself going through it, I had to think about it for a second. What are they doing here? Oh, I see it. Because you got 3 wires going for clutch power, and you're like, what the heck? But it's because they're going fused power to your AC control, and then they already have a wire located in the engine bay that goes from your control unit out to your AC clutch. So they don't specify the difference between those except for by the circuit number. So you got to look at the circuit numbers and kind of get a grasp of what's going on there. But still very well made system. There's a lot of other ones out there. They've been making street rod harnesses for years. They do well, but notations and really sitting down and thinking about what what you're working on, and the component you're working on, because you'll find on Dave's car, he bought a whole bunch of retro sound stereo equipment. So he's got a 5-channel amplifier, plus he's got a subwoofer amplifier, and then speakers, and then the stereo up front. And all of those components are designed to be used independently or together. But they really don't specify the instructions for using them all together. The instructions are more written to, this is how you use this component in your vehicle. So that can be a little confusing for people at times. But I'm sure if you don't have anybody to lean on for assistance with that, you can always call the manufacturer and they can walk you through that. They may even be able to supply you with a schematic of all the components together. So that way now all you have to do is hook up the batteries and the battery power, ground power, and switch power to the vehicle. That's all that actually goes to the vehicle. Everything else, it goes to each component. So then it becomes pretty understandable. So it's just, again, working on these things is just making sure you get all these nuances. I mean, this switch panel was another one where they're giving you a ton. They're telling you all the different things you can do, but you're not going to need all of the things they're showing you. So, that's one of those deals that you have to say, okay, well, I need this trans brake circuit, and I want this bump starter circuit. I don't need this loop thing to have one relay turn another relay on. I don't need that. So, so then you can, write down on your notes, and then you can lay out everything out. So you can see here, I still got a lot of wiring to go. This is the connector that's going to come from the AMS. So all the AMS stuff still needs to be wired in, and I still have a couple outputs that have to go out for the headlights, the water pump. Water pump's in the car. Headlights, starter, and fuel pump. That all has to go out this connector here, which you can't see, but there's nothing in it yet. So I'll get some finished up pictures for you guys next week on this. And there's the back side. So, and again, there's the battery for you guys that may not have seen this in the beginning. So race car using a lithium battery. We mount them in the front of the car. I use these 50 amp quick disconnects for the battery charger. So the battery charger has no alligator clips for somebody to connect to something wrong. The connector only plugs in one way. People in the industry uses them for batteries and for power transfer for all kinds of things. I've seen them on fork trucks. NASCAR uses them on their batteries. You know, like you're on a NASCAR, they have a battery that sits behind or in front of the left rear tire. So their battery, they put a 175 amp connector just like this. It's a little bit bigger. They make a loop out of a cable tie for it. And then the other side of that connector is hard mounted in the chassis. So that way, if the car battery goes dead during a race, while they're doing the tire change, 2 quick fasteners pops a panel off. They yank the battery and that loop at the same time, and the whole thing comes sliding out. They plug the new one in, put that panel back on, change the tire, and it only adds maybe 2 seconds to the pit stop. So I mean, those guys have that stuff figured out. But again, these connectors are used for a lot of things. And then we were talking about this last week. I was mentioning it to Chris, because Chris was having a lot of problems with his car. It was his Nova. When they wired the car, they used a painless kit, but they wired it to replace everything stock. And then, you know, they throw in the LS3 supercharged with intercooler coolant pumps and electric water pumps and vintage air and all these components that weren't in an original 69, 70 Nova, whatever his Nova is, and they kept burning the fuse links out at the starter. So this unit here is the kind of unit you would use to fix that problem, because this thing is very low draw. It's in the millivolts, and it's 500 amps. So you can come off your battery to this unit, have the ignition switch, turn this on and off, and then you have a big stud that you could go to an auxiliary fuse panel. You could go to a bunch of a distribution block to go to all your heavy power using accessories. So that's how you keep an old car without having to upgrade the wiring to the ignition switch and all that stuff, like we were talking last week. Early cars, 60s, 50s cars, those cars only had like 30 amps of complete service in the car, and new cars have upwards to 200 amps. So obviously, if you have all those switch items going through your ignition switch, eventually you're going to overrate the ignition switch, and the ignition switch contacts are going to burn up, and it's going to leave you stranded. Hopefully that's the least it does. It could burn fuse links, it could burn fuses, or if the car was wired with none of that in there, it could catch the car on fire and burn to the ground. So, you know, electricity is like fuel. You don't want to mess with it. You want to make sure you do it properly so it lasts. And, you know, that's probably pretty much all I have for that. I think that's the last, it's the last slideshow. So let me switch out of here. There we go. So I hope that was informative, and hopefully, you know, when I get this video done on Dave's car, I'm really hoping that it eliminates some of the scariness that automotive wiring can be for the layman. Two things, even well, one thing for me always, but But two things I hear all the time when you're talking to somebody who wants to get in the sport, they want a collector car, they want a hot rod, they want some type of amateur race car. You always hear people say, "I need the car already painted, already have three things: already have upholstery done, and have wiring done." Those are the three components that seem to be the most daunting for people. Even though mechanical is very daunting, but it doesn't seem to be as scary to people. They're like, "Oh, it's nuts and bolts and this and that," and they feel that they can do that stuff. Wiring, people are always scared of wiring, and I think the paint and interior, a lot of that is just more that most people don't have the equipment to do it, and paint and body. There's an art. The stuff that Ryan does is phenomenal. That's top tier work that he does. But even to the hobby shop guy, it still can be, you don't want to have sand scratches. You want the panels to be straight-ish. When you get up to the level that Ryan does, then it's everything's laser straight. And my hat's off to you guys that do that. I grew up in body shop helping my dad during the summers and stuff, and that was relentless. I for some reason just have a hard time finding the patience for it. The other thing too, when I was a kid, I had a lot of allergies, and Bondo dust made my allergies go nuts. I don't know, it was just the dust or whatever, but so I'd have runny nose the whole summer. So that made it not fun. I liked doing the framework and stuff like that, and changing quarter panels and stuff like that. I enjoyed that part. I still enjoy metal fab. It's the finished work that my hat's off to you guys, and I'd rather have you guys do it. But the other stuff, it just is what it is. But the wiring is not really that hard. You don't need a lot of equipment. A good voltmeter, ohm meter, test harnesses. Another power probe is a good unit if you use it carefully. And then a handful of good quality crimping tools and proper crimping connector terminals, and if you get into WeatherPack and Deutsch and stuff like that, there's some specialty tools there. But all that stuff just keeps elevating the final product. So you could just do crimp and heat shrink, and either leave all the wiring exposed or use I like using F6 split loom. That makes it nice and easy. You can always use the convoluted tubing like GM used to use, a lot of the manufacturers used back in the day. The only thing with that, it does get brittle with heat and stuff, and it's not flame retardant or anything like that. So I don't prefer using that. I will put it on a customer's car if they're trying to keep it looking period correct. But yeah, I'd rather not. I like the F6 split loom. Is a woven, I believe it's nylon. It has some fire retardant to it. It has some heat barrier to it. They have different, the manufacturer makes some stuff that's fireproof, and they make all kinds of different stuff, but the F6 is the common stuff. It's the same thing that comes on all your Holley EFI components. It's easy to work with. I like that you can open up the harness and add a wire, take a wire out. And I see Ryan says he really enjoys wiring. It makes sense because you have the patience to do the body work you do. So, once you understand what you're doing, patience is what it really takes. So, yeah, I enjoy it myself. John says the Tessa tape also, that's really good. So that, those are a handful of good components, and you can wire a car. I mean, like I said, heat shrink and non-insulated terminals, two good crimping, a good crimper and a good stripper. You can wire your car with less than $100 worth of tools. So that's something that people, I hope in the future aren't as afraid of it as possible. Like I said, when I get Dave's car done, I'm going to get a complete wiring tutorial on YouTube for it. There's a bunch of them out there also. Just trying to make those things so people aren't so scared. I do get probably 2 calls a month that people want to bring their car in for a complete rewire. Unfortunately, with the workload I have, I can't do it. And then they're like, well, what do I do now? And it's like, well, you can do it yourself. Oh, no, I can't do that. So hopefully with the videos and stuff out, maybe people could get a shot at doing something like that. And I'm sure, everybody has if you're not a technician, somebody has a friend that is a technician that could help you with that stuff, and there's tons of information on the web, how to understand the relays and diodes and resistors and all that stuff. So it is a job that does require patience. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. It takes quite a while to lay out the wiring in the car. It doesn't take that long. If you have it properly laid out, it doesn't take long to actually perform the wiring. It's getting it laid out so that it makes sense, and then it works in the car, and those are all those things that you just have to get through. But again, if you're going to take on a job like that, I would definitely call the manufacturers of the components you're using. I'm sure they want companies like Painless want people to wire their own cars. That's why they sell the kits. Their kits aren't necessarily made for the professional guy. The professional guy can usually build his own harness, but for the person that's going to do 1 or 2 cars in their lifetime, that's their target audience. So they are going to be very helpful. Painless, for that matter, is their instruction manuals are very well written. But like I said, when you're combining different components from different manufacturers, that's where some of the frustrations could rise. So that's a point where you want to call the manufacturers and get a tech guy on the phone, and I'm sure they'll be able to. I know they'll be able to help you out with it. Hopefully they can come up with some schematics of some sort that would help you through it. But I think that's my speech tonight for wiring. We'll probably have another one of these in the near future when I get Dave's car done. It will probably be a little while yet. I'm still in the planning stages because unfortunately every time we get talking about it, there's another component that I wasn't aware of, or that Dave thought I knew about it, I didn't know about it, whatever. So and then you have to readjust your planning on it. So planning is the biggest part of the wiring job. Really getting everything laid out, and when you look at a schematic from a manufacturer, you can see how they've already got it laid out. So at that point, all you have to do is think about the routing in the car and how it's going to interact with other components, and think about it, study it, write notes, and then go to your car and go through it again, make sure it makes sense that when you do it in the car. And then once you got it, you're comfortable with all your notes and all your schematics, then go to work with your crimpers and get her done. So so that's pretty much it. Ryan says I'm no pro. I have to use system like Painless or others. There's nothing wrong with that. They're great systems, and I mean, especially if you do a wiring job, you do one wiring job a year. It's hard to, you got to get your mind in the wiring gear, because you have to do all that preliminary use. Now, when you go to a painless system, and especially on a vehicle that's got very little extra components in it, it's laid out awesome. They've already done all the layout work for you. They've already bundled the harnesses in a, tail harness for the back of the car, engine bay harness for the front of the car, instrument cluster for under the dash. I mean, they've already got it laid out. Of course, sometimes you have to move stuff around for your particular application, but 90% of that layout work is already done for you. So there's nothing wrong at all using the painless systems. Not at all. Or the Ron Francis, or I don't know, there's a handful of them out there that are pretty good. They've been in the industry for, I can remember when I first started, back in the 80s, a lot of those companies were already in business doing that stuff. And then Painless went into the OEM EFI systems too. They make their own. You can buy a harness from them to retrofit a engine swap if you want to retain the stock ECU. So, they've moved along with the marketplace. And like I said, their manuals, I think their manuals are probably the best manuals out there for your do-it-yourselfer kit. Some of the smaller companies and lesser circuits, their instructions are very vague, so you got to kind of do a lot more work, layout work on your own. So that's the big difference. You get what you pay for. Painless and Ron Francis and stuff like that, you're paying a little extra for the kit, but you're getting countless amount of savings in all the legwork and instructions have already been done for you. So it just makes perfect sense to do that. And of course, one good thing about the painless systems is they make harnesses that go, so like on Dave's car, we wanted to reuse the factory, bulkhead connector at the firewall like GM does. Well, they make a fuse panel that bolts in the stock location and uses their bulkhead, but uses it in the factory location. So it just goes together and it looks like it's, a factory deal when you're done with it, and just makes it easy. And of course, the great thing about the painless is with the book, you've got all your notes. Somebody can go behind you and figure it out pretty easily because all the circuits are written on the wires. So very good to, don't think, oh, I'm no pro because I'm using painless harness. That's not the fact of the matter at all. You're just saving yourself a lot of effort. Hats off for that. That's smart thinking. So that was it. So we're gonna hopefully have the Regal running hopefully midweek. I got a couple little things I got to finish up on that, a little bit of the wiring, and I got to put fluids in it. I did get oil in the motor and prime the oil. Got to get fuel for it and stuff like that. So I'll try to get a little video of it running next week and get a little walk around. Bill asked, when and where are you going racing next? Well, the Regal Rihanna 2.0 is the name of that car, and Papa Smurf, they are both supposed to be South Georgia Motorsports Park on the 29th and 30th. Our race team, the Slider Boys, they're promoting the event, so we're promoters and we're going to try to have our cars there racing. Unfortunately, with time delays and workload and all that stuff, we're really cutting it close. But we're going to try to get it done. But that's where we'll be next. I will be there, whether the cars are running or not. We have to go up there and help work the show and stuff, the race. And then my next event that I have scheduled after that would be, I think it's the last Sunday of April, back to Bradenton Motorsports Park with the Studebaker. Have a couple things to work on, the ECU and that, and so I gotta get over there sometime, probably right after the first of the month, and get all the car put back together, get it ready to go, and then that Sunday I think it is the 28th. We'll be in Bradenton, April 28th for Sunday, Run Day Sunday. And see where we're at with that. Unfortunately, as life goes, bolting the new turbo on just didn't make it go automatically fast as hell. We're still, we've not knowing. Well, first stepping back when the turbo was first damaged, we had data recorders that were not working. Stuff that I did not put in the car, and I was working with stuff that other people had worked with. The big stuff, 3 computers, one of those that I never really worked with a whole lot. And John Meany is he's a pay-to-play guy, so you can't have his fuel injection in the car and just get data log out of it. If you want to hook it to a race pack, you have to send it to him. He's got to do a bunch of upgrades, charge you a bunch of money to have a blue connector sticking out that connects to your race pack. And then, of course, unfortunately, Leo had bought a Sportsman logger because the guy that was helping with it said, "Oh, we just need dry shaft and engine RPM." But no, you need to be able to talk to your fuel injection, because your fuel injection doesn't data log. So it just became a big hot mess. And then we started having issues with stuff not, we'd run the car and get back to the pits and there's no record. And so while the turbo was disintegrating, we had no way of knowing it. And then once I put the Holly system in, now we're just reading the data. The turbo's already bad, so we don't know that the turbo has gone bad because it's the first time we got to see the data. So we've changed, rear end gear ratios. We've changed transmission from 2-speed to a 3-speed. We've changed torque converter a couple times. All those things when we were fighting the data acquisition issues. So now we don't know. We've gotten so many things wrong now. We got to slowly go back and try different things on. The 3-speed transmission, I think, is right no matter what. The biggest thing is getting boost on the starting line. And after I go to Leo's at the beginning of the month and get the Dominator back in the car and get that all ironed out, and I do some anti-lag tuning, if it doesn't work then that converter just isn't going to work for that car. At this point, we still don't know. I don't want to say $3,000 torque converter is no good if there's something that we can do. If we can get the anti-lag right, we maybe can get it to spool. And where the issue is with a turbo car is the engine, when there's no boost, usually doesn't make much power. I think that motor will probably make 350 horsepower with no boost, because it's made to have boost. But when the boost comes in, the horsepower jumps exponentially. So we want to launch that car with our goal would be to launch it 15 pounds of boost. What 15 pounds of boost, that motor's now making almost 1,000 horsepower. So it went from 300 horsepower to 1,000 horsepower. So there's this tight line you have to walk with the torque converter. It's got to be loose enough to get past that zero boost range to get into where it starts building boost, so that the converter can then loosen up enough to let you get all the way to where you want to get to, if that makes sense. So a stall in a converter, you have to make X amount of horsepower or torque to stop or separate the hydraulic coupling of the torque converter. That's what a torque converter is. It's a hydraulic coupler. So you've got, a bunch of fins in the converter and fluids doing circles going through the fins, a C shape here, a C shape here. One side's pump side, the other side's housing side, and then you've got a stator in the middle with angles there. And as the fluid from the pump side it's turning, so it's agitating the fluid, it starts following that and going through this cycle. So it's a hydraulic coupler. So when the torque is low, it's very easy for the torque converter to couple because there's not enough force in the engine to uncouple it. So you just can't have a super loose converter, because if you make it super loose, like a nitrous converter for a low horsepower nitrous converter, or an NA bracket car, it's easy to uncouple the converter and get it to stall at 5,000, by the design of the stator and the pumps and the turbo and the torque converter, but if you did that and then you put the boost on and then it starts making the 1,000 horsepower, now when you let go of the brake and the car leaves the starting line, it's never going to couple, because it's just uncoupled, and it won't recouple till way down the end of the track. That's what they call driving through the converter, and it's just like you're slipping the clutch all the way down the track. So that's where the problem is. We got to figure out a way to get the RPM up enough to start creating boost so that we can get the converter to uncouple so that we can leave the line with a lot of boost. That's the long and short of it. So that converter just may not be the right setup. And the last time we talked to Pro Torque, the components that are in that converter, that's as loose as they can make. So it just may not be the right component at all, because when we were giving them the information, we weren't having reliable data to go off of, and there may have been some miscommunication, but nevertheless, we have a converter that is at the end of its usefulness as far as what we're trying to achieve. So we may have to drop back and put one of the older converters that we had before that we thought at one point may not have been working right, but that could have been just bad when the turbo was starting to fail. So again, we got the cart's kind of in front of the horse, so we got to uncouple and get the horses back in front of the coach to get it to go down the track the way we need to. So we just got to work through it. And I'm not a big proponent, although we're running out of time, running out of good turbo weather, but I really don't want to just throw 50 things at it and see how it works out, because then one, you're not going to learn anything, and two, you still may not have fixed it, because one of the components still may not have been the right one, and you won't know it. So we got to go back through it, one component every time we take the car out, look at the data, make a decision on what to do next, and go from there. So it's a process. Anybody that's worked on drag cars like that, anything that's not a cookie cutter deal, it can be daunting, and unfortunately, for most people, they want things right now. So it makes it tough, but we just got to keep pushing through. And the other part of that is that Leo being 3 hours away from me and stuff like that, and we got some tow vehicle issues and stuff like that, it just doesn't make it easy. So we'll keep working through it, and hopefully we'll have some updates real soon on that deal. See, it's a quarter after, so I think we'll go ahead and pull the plug on this show. Thanks everybody for coming on and listening to me rant and rave about wiring. I'm sure it was super interesting. I hopefully it was, but just try to think about what I'm doing during the week and try to come up with some kind of something we can turn into a tech discussion. So a lot of it has to do with what I'm working on. So, but I've said in the past, you guys ever want to send info to me on your cars or a project or something you're having a hard time with, feel free on the you can put it in the comments on the live show, or you can go to the my YouTube homepage, and my contact information's on there, email addresses and stuff like that. Shoot me an email and send me some pictures and stuff, and then we can definitely go after it, and everybody learn something, me included. We're all here to learn and to build really badass cars. So with that, I think I'm going to call it a night. Thanks again for everybody showing up and joining in, and hope you all have a good night, and see y'all next Tuesday. See ya.